bloodthirsty and brutal murders, burning of villages and cities, robberies and destruction. That's how the Mongol expansion that took place in the 13th century is usually described. In this episode of Histographics, we will examine whether the Mongols were really as cruel and ruthless savages as is commonly believed. To begin with, let's examine what the Mongolian state was in general. It all started with a guy named Temujin, or as we all know, Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan succeeded in defeating the neighboring tribes of Tartars, Naimans, Merkits, and Kureitis, as well as executing his main rival and childhood friend, Jumaka. Jumaka also wanted to unite the Mongol tribes, but Genghis Khan was more agile in this matter. As a sign of old friendship, Genghis Khan proposed reconciliation, but the proud Jumaka refused and asked only for a more humane death without bloodshed. Genghis Khan listened and ordered his subordinate to break Jumaka's spine. Then Genghis Khan began to reorganize his army and the entire state. Whereas in most of the medieval world, career growth was determined by belonging to the clan aristocracy, Temujin eradicated this principle. In the Mongol Empire, only personal ability and loyalty to the Khan mattered. Thus, showing outstanding military talents and skills, one could rise to the very top of the hierarchy, including becoming a member of Khan's personal guard. And an ordinary soldier from Khan's personal guard was higher in status than any major military leader from other divisions. In addition, Genghis Khan introduced another innovation. He created the Tumen, military units that don't really have an analogous example, and reached 10,000 people in number. After the capture of neighboring Mongol tribes and the reorganization of the state, Genghis Khan managed to conquer the Jin Empire, part of modern China. The emperor of the Jin state bore the title Son of Heaven, which was one of the reasons for Genghis Khan's attack. Temujin believed that only he was worthy of this title. Being the Son of Heaven meant receiving the mandate of heaven from Tengri, the deified sky, which was revered by the Mongol tribes. From the point of view of ordinary Mongols, the war with Jin was a blood feud for the death of relatives, including Genghis Khan's father, Usigi Bagatur. He was killed by the Tartars, whose allies were the Jin Empire. Then, Genghis Khan managed to conquer all of Central Asia, and his descendants expanded the borders of the Mongol Empire from Korea to the Mediterranean, from Vietnam and Tibet to Siberia. Thus, the maximum territory of the Mongol Empire, according to various estimates, reached from 24 to 33 million square kilometers. In comparison, the territory of the Soviet Union was just over 22 million square kilometers. Only the British Empire, with all of its numerous colonies, achieved such a large scale throughout history. Hence, a logical question arises. Is it possible to control such vast territories, being ruthless and cruel? Some historians often cite the mention of the ancient Russian city of Kozalek as proof of the inhumanity of the Mongols. In 1238, the army of Khan Batu Khan destroyed all 4,000 of its inhabitants and razed the city to the ground. However, the same historians often forgot to mention that before this event, in 1223, Prince Mstislav executed the Mongol ambassadors who arrived in Colossal. No self-respecting medieval empire could forgive such a trick. In addition, the Mongols had a principle of collective responsibility. According to this principle, the punishment for a crime must be borne by all residents of the city. For example, the city of Hamadan, located in the territory of modern Iran, was completely destroyed. All residents, regardless of gender and age, were killed. The only exceptions were those who were suitable for the military needs of the Mongols. To a modern person, of course, this seems wild, but in the medieval world, this could hardly surprise anyone. And the Mongol murders, in comparison with the European civilized atrocities, may now seem like an innocent prank. Take, for example, Basil II, the Emperor of Byzantium, a state considered one of the most civilized at the time. Emperor Vasily blinded 15,000 Bulgarian prisoners of war. He left a single eye for one prisoner so that he could lead the horde of blind men home. The Christian Crusaders were even more brutal. In 1098, during the assault on the city of Antioch, the Crusaders massacred all Jews and Muslims, including babies. A year later, similar atrocities were repeated during the capture of Jerusalem. But apparently it's wrong, according to Christians, that religion cost the lives of thousands of innocent people. The Mongols, on the other hand, were distinguished by unprecedented religious tolerance. The shamanic beliefs of the Mongols, or Tengerism, did not order them to convert the conquered people to their faith. In addition, tolerance towards other religions made it easy to distinguish between friends and foes. In 1320, Oz Beg, Khan of Golden Horde, converted to Islam and began to cruelly deal with the infidels. But this is a completely different story. It should be noted that Europeans were distinguished by their cruelty not only against religious apostates. By order of the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, Frederick Barbarossa, during the assault on the city of Cremona in 1160, the captive Italians had their heads cut off, after which they played football. But the bloodthirsty ruler entered history not only as an example of cruelty, but as a glorious knight and a great commander. The Cremonians, who suffered from the emperor, also did not remain in debt. They publicly cut off the genitals of the German prisoners. Barbarossa responded by catapulting Italian children into the walls of the fortification. I think it would be superfluous to go into details of what happened in the end to the poor kids. The Mongols, on the other hand, were not seen doing anything like that. Paradoxical as it may sound, Genghis Khan himself killed many in order to end up killing as few as possible. He believed that if several cities were completely destroyed, all the rest would surrender without resistance and accordingly without casualties. A similar strategy was adopted by his children and grandchildren. And it really worked. Some cities surrendered immediately upon the arrival of the Mongol ambassadors, since rumors about the destructiveness of the Mongols spread very quickly. The Mongols did not exterminate the best representatives of the conquered people, but used them for their own purposes. Before Genghis Khan, powerful city fortresses served as a good defense against nomadic tribes, but not from the Mongols. In 1205, Genghis Khan first encountered the fortified cities of the Tangut people. The first two fortifications were not easy for him. The army of Genghis Khan besieged the city for 60 days, thereby dooming local residents to starvation. The Mongols continuously attacked the fortress until the defenders of the city ran out of strength. Genghis Khan instantly learned his lessons. He adopted not only the sedimentary technology of the time, but also specialists who could train the Mongol army to more effectively besiege fortresses. Thanks to these acquisitions, as well as superhuman patience, Genghis Khan managed to take the Great Wall of China within 2 years. In India, one meeting was enough for the Mongols to understand how to fight an army of elephants. At first, of course, they were defeated, but already for the next battle, they prepared burning arrows that forced the elephants to run back, trampling their own soldiers along the way. Many considered the Mongol attacks to be spontaneous and accidental, but this was not the case. Each military offensive was carefully thought out. All the warriors rode on horseback, which meant that the routes had to include meadows and pastures. In addition to being excellent horsemen, the Mongols could easily combine archery with horseback riding. None of the conquered peoples possessed such a skill. Yep, there were even horses. Even the Mongolian fleet was the most powerful. At first glance, the presence of a fleet of nomadic tribes may seem like something from a fairy tale. But the grandson of Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan, had 800 ships at his disposal. Only the anti-Hitler Allied coalition managed to break this record during the Second World War. With the help of the ships, Kublai reached Japan twice, but the natural conditions were on the side of the Japanese. Typhooned both times practically destroyed the Mongolian fleet. In gratitude for this, the Japanese called it the Divine Wind, or kamikaze. Despite the defeat, the third attempt could have been more successful, but the Khan was already distracted by uprisings in the already conquered Korea, South China, and Vietnam. In fact, these same uprisings saved most of Europe from further destruction. After capturing Kievan Rus, destroying several Hungarian and Polish cities, the Mongols were forced to stop. When Kublai passed away in 1294, the Mongol conquest ceased. True, it should be noted that the official date of the collapse of the Mongol Empire is considered to be the year of the birth of Kublai, 1260th. 6 years after the birth of Genghis Khan's grandson, the Mongol Empire split into the Yuan dynasty, the Golden Horde, the Ilkhanate state, and the Chagatai Khanate. But all these states did not last long. The Red Turban Rebellions in 1386 destroyed the Han Mongol Empire in modern China. The Battle of Kulikovo of 1380 weakened the influence of the Golden Horde, and in 1480, thanks to the Great Stand on the Irga River, the Mongol-Tatar yoke finally ended in the Moscow Principality. The Chagatai Ulus began to split up in 1340, and the Hulagid state ceased to recognize the power of the Great Khan a year after the death of Kublai. Of course, all the conquests ended in a huge number of victims. Often, archaeologists have found whole mass graves with the killed representatives of the peoples conquered by the Mongols. Indeed, the Mongols terrified all of Eurasia. However, they caused fear not by their cruelty, but by the success of their military maneuvers. The murders committed by the Mongols were rather pragmatic in nature. They even knew how to benefit from their own losses. Thus, during the capture of the Genoese fortress of Kaffa in the Crimea, the Mongols used biological weapons of their own production. At that time, Europe, like the Mongol Empire, was suffering from the plague. The Mongols catapulted the corpses of their relatives to the fortress, thereby infecting the local population. It turns out that the Mongols killed as much as was required to conquer a particular territory, no more. It's just that the volumes and pace of conquest was incredibly huge. In other historical eras, the scale of the conquest might have been somewhat smaller, but everything was compensated for by the incredible cruelty. Think, for example, about the cost of Nazi Germany's crimes. So, answering the main question, were the Mongols ruthless? We can say probably not. They were professional warriors for whom killing was a simple routine. True, the Mongols were more favorable to the nomadic people than to the sedentary, considering the city dwellers unworthy. The Mongols cannot be called savages either. At their initial stages, they were inferior to other peoples in the level of development and the quality of weapons. However, the ability to learn at lightning speed and adapt to rapidly changing environmental conditions, as well as tough discipline, made Mongolia the most powerful empire in the history of mankind. It is curious that to date, genetic analysis has identified several million descendants of Genghis Khan himself. Every fourth inhabitant of Mongolia carries the genes of the Great Khan. True, the Son of Heaven himself had only 4 official sons, each of whom left several dozen of their children. Only Juche, the eldest son of Genghis Khan, had 40 legitimate sons. And the dynasties of Genghisids, that is, the direct descendants of Genghis Khan, ruled many states of Central Asia for more than 1 century, from Mongolia to Kazakhstan to the Crimean Khanate. What do you think about the cruelty of the Mongol conquerors? Did their behavior differ from the barbarism of medieval Europe? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Like it if you liked the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so as not to miss new episodes.